They called security on a blackteen. His mum shut down the airport in 12 minutes. A blinding midday sun glimmered over the tarmac, and the bustling energy of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport crackled in the air. Travelers zipped through terminals, juggling coffee cups, passports, and whispered goodbyes. Amid this controlled chaos, a routine family trip threatened to unravel in the most explosive way possible. At the center of it all was a soft-spoken black teenager with a wide-eyed curiosity, a boy who had no idea how quickly things could turn when prejudice flared. 12 minutes, one furious mom, and an airport teetering on shutdown. No one believed it until they witnessed it. And by then, it was too late. Morning broke with a serene glow over the Campbell family home in Atlanta. Rays of sunshine filtered through the blinds, casting diagonal patterns on the living room carpet. 18-year-old Marcus Campbell was sprawled on the couch, eyes half closed, as his mother, Desiree, calmly finished packing a small suitcase with last-minute essentials. The two were preparing to visit relatives in San Francisco, a trip meant to be routine, maybe even a little dull. Yet, from the moment Marcus woke up with a flutter of nervous excitement, he sensed today was different. Desiree was a single mother who had raised Marcus with equal parts discipline, love, and an unshakable belief in the power of standing up for what's right. She had grown up in a neighborhood where resources were scarce and discrimination was a daily reality. Perhaps it was that background that instilled in her a fierce protective streak when it came to her only child. That morning, Marcus was supposed to be up earlier. He was supposed to help with last-minute errands, help load the car, and check their flight times. But as typical for a teenager on the cusp of adulthood, he pressed the snooze button one too many times. Desiree forgave him with a wry smile, still feeling a rush of maternal nostalgia. Her baby was practically grown, but she would always see a toddler giggling in a crib whenever she looked at him. At the breakfast table, Marcus poked lazily at a plate of scrambled eggs, while Desiree reminded him to bring the novel he had been reading for his AP literature class. Even though it was summer, Marcus wanted to impress his future college professors by staying academically sharp. He always had a book in his backpack this time. It was Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. Desiree noted the choice with quiet pride. She had read that same book years ago, and the poignant stories of identity and race still resonated with her. They needed to leave soon. The flight was set for early afternoon. Marcus and Desiree double-checked everything: boarding passes, identification, phone chargers, that special jacket Marcus liked to wear on planes because it had plenty of pockets. Once they confirmed everything was in order, they locked the front door and headed out. The clunky, maroon Toyota Camry in the driveway had seen better days, but it was reliable. They slid in, belts clicked, engine turned over, and they were on their way. Desiree navigated the familiar route to Hartsfield-Jackson, driving down I-85 with calm efficiency. Marcus stared out the window, daydreaming about what San Francisco might be like in the early summer. A gentle bay breeze, crisp city air, and of course, the endless stories he had heard about the Golden Gate Bridge. He'd never traveled there before, and the excitement fluttered in his stomach. His headphones played some underground hip-hop, the beats mixing with the hum of the freeway traffic. Tension first prickled when they reached the airport terminals. Car horns blared as travelers scrambled for drop-off spaces. Overwhelmed crowds of tourists lugged mountainous suitcases, blocking traffic as they trudged across crosswalks. Desiree kept her composure. She had navigated these roads many times before, sometimes for business, sometimes for weekend getaways. This was just another airport run, she told herself. Inside the terminal, the air conditioning whooshed overhead, providing a refreshing respite from the Georgia heat. With each step, their footsteps echoed across gleaming tile floors. They moved past check-in counters with lines snaking around stanchions, plus the occasional harried traveller sprinting to catch a flight. Marcus glanced at the boards, listing departures and arrivals, his eyes wide and curious. Desiree led him toward the self-check in kiosks to confirm their boarding passes. A white-haired man in a pressed suit was at the kiosk next to them, tapping furiously at the touchscreen. His frustration grew with each beep of denial from the machine. Next to him, a young woman wearing a bright pink hoodie rummaged through her purse in a panic, struggling to find her ID. Hartsfield-Jackson, the busiest airport in the world, was living up to its reputation. Marcus fidgeted, flipping his phone back and forth in his hands. Normally, big crowds didn't bother him. He was a city kid used to bustling sidewalks, but something felt off. He couldn't quite place the source of this unease. Was it the sense that security lines were extra long today? Or maybe it was the general tension that always comes with travel, everyone on a tight schedule, anxiously hoping for no delays. Desiree smoothly completed the check-in process, ignoring the kiosk's attempt to upsell them on seat upgrades. With boarding passes in hand, she guided Marcus toward TSA security, where they were greeted by an intimidating line that zigzagged through the maze of stanchions. She glanced at her watch. If all went smoothly, they would have enough time to grab a late breakfast at their gate before boarding. Marcus slid his phone and boarding pass into one of the jacket's inner pockets as he prepared for the wait. He glanced at the digital signage overhead. Make sure to have your ID and boarding pass ready. He noticed a group of uniformed TSA agents casually chatting as they directed travelers. They looked bored, yet alert, scanning the lines for anything out of the ordinary. Nothing about the moment screamed trouble. Desiree tapped his shoulder and leaned in close. "Try to relax, honey," she whispered. "We're just a bit behind schedule." Marcus managed a grin. If he had known that in under an hour he would be thrust into the most startling, life-changing event of his young existence, he might have clung more tightly to that fleeting sense of normalcy. Desiree Campbell grew up in a Georgia town scarred by racial tensions. Her father, a civil rights lawyer, instilled in her the belief that silence in the face of injustice is complicity. Those lessons shaped her backbone of steel. Raising Marcus as a single mother, Desiree witnessed early signs of discrimination: store clerks following him at the mall, teachers suggesting he lower his college ambitions. Though he excelled academically, Marcus often faced microaggressions, from classmates' wary looks to a friend's parents cancelling invitations once they realized he was black. Desiree shielded him as best she could, urging him to remain calm but never accept mistreatment. Marcus channeled that advice into reading, poetry, and hard work. By the time he turned 18, he'd grown into a thoughtful young man, and Desiree's greatest fear was that his gentle nature would be no match for the cruel unpredictability of racism. The trip to San Francisco was meant to be their peaceful break before Marcus headed to college. 5 minutes later, they reached the front of the TSA screening area. The bustling officer at the ID checkpoint was a wiry man with stern eyes. He barely offered a greeting as Desiree handed over their documents. She tried to make polite small talk, but the officer brusquely motioned them forward once he confirmed their identities. Desiree chalked it up to a hectic day. She tucked her license away and guided Marcus toward the bins used for laptops, shoes, and liquids. Marcus felt a flutter in his chest. Airports had always fascinated him, the controlled chaos, the giant planes roaring overhead, but the security lines made him uneasy. There was a sense that anything could go wrong. He removed his sneakers and slipped them into a bin, then followed instructions to place his backpack and phone inside another. He gently added his prized hardcover novel on top, reluctant to separate from it for even a moment. Desiree did the same with her purse, laptop, and jacket. As they neared the full body scanner, she reminded Marcus about potential random checks, especially for individuals wearing bulky clothing. Marcus removed his hoodie to avoid confusion. He stepped through the scanner, pausing to lift his arms as instructed. The machine whirred, scanning him from head to toe. Within seconds, the green light blinked, and the TSA officer on the other side waved him through. A small jolt of relief flickered inside him. Disarray followed, also cleared without incident. It appeared they had dodged any random checks. They waited, breath held, for their bags to emerge on the other side. Disarray's purse and laptop arrived with no issue, sliding down the conveyor. Marcus's backpack and phone soon followed. But just as they prepared to walk away, another TSA agent, this one stocky, with cropped hair, called out, "Whose backpack is this?" Marcus stepped forward. "That's mine," he said politely. The agent furrowed his brow at the X-ray screen. Marcus felt a pang of anxiety bloom in his chest. The agent signaled for a bag check. "We need to check something inside." "Step over here, please." Marcus exchanged glances with Disarray, who nodded reassuringly. She'd been through bag checks before. Usually, it was something harmless like an unopened water bottle or a container of lotion that exceeded TSA limits. Marcus followed directions, standing by as the agent slid the bag onto a metal table. Another officer, a tall woman with a calm demeanor, came over. She put on gloves and began rifling through the contents. Marcus's phone, headphones, a small notepad, a pack of gum, and his hardcover novel were all laid out in plain view. Disarray hovered close, but not too close. She knew better than to crowd the agents or appear confrontational. Still, tension thrummed in her veins. She'd had friends who had been subjected to special searches that turned invasive. The officer paused at the hardcover novel, flipping through the pages as though expecting something to be hidden inside. Then she reached into a side pocket and pulled out a small plastic pouch. Marcus blinked in confusion. He had no recollection of any such pouch. The officer's eyes narrowed. "What's this?" Marcus's heart rate spiked. He stepped forward to see. Inside the clear pouch was some white, powdery substance. His mind reeled. He'd never seen that before, never carried anything like it. Fear pounded through him, and for a moment he struggled to speak. A cold sweat formed at the back of his neck. I don't know," Marcus managed to say, voice trembling. "That's not mine. I've never seen that before." Disarray's stomach twisted into knots. She stepped forward, scanning her son's face. Marcus looked genuinely terrified, a mix of confusion and dread swirling in his eyes. She turned to the officer. "MAAM, there must be some mistake. My son doesn't carry anything like that." Before the officer could respond, a second TSA agent approached, his hand resting near the radio on his hip. The tension thickened. "We need to test this," the tall woman said, carefully resealing the pouch. Disarray's heart hammered. She had heard horror stories about people being framed or mistakenly identified for drug possession. Marcus whispered, "Mom, I swear," but Disarray gently squeezed his arm. "I know. Let's keep calm." The test kit came out, a small set of vials and a reagent. The officer dabbed a portion of the powder, then waited. The seconds stretched like hours. Disarray mentally replayed every step since leaving their house, desperately trying to recall if the bag had ever been out of sight. They had used the restroom at the same time. The backpack had been momentarily placed by a seat in the waiting area. Could someone have tampered with it? The test result came back negative for any controlled substances, indicated by the lack of color change in the reagent. Relief washed over Marcus so strongly that he nearly collapsed with gratitude. The officer frowned, uncertain. "It's not testing as a narcotic. Still, I need to call a supervisor for protocol." Disarray exhaled shakily, wanting to demand they hurry up and let them go, but she held her tongue. She recognized the precariousness of the situation. The mention of a supervisor often meant more scrutiny. Minutes dragged by. A supervisor eventually arrived, a sturdy woman with a name tag that read Supervisor Maynard. She listened as the officers explained the situation, then inspected the pouch herself. She turned to Marcus. "You're saying this doesn't belong to you?" "No," Marcus said emphatically, voice quavering. "I've never seen it before." Supervisor Maynard studied him with a piercing gaze. Then she glanced at Desiree, who maintained steady eye contact. "Do you have any idea how this might have gotten into your bag?" Desiree was about to respond when a commotion erupted behind them. A different passenger was yelling at a TSA agent about an expensive watch that might have gone missing during screening. For a moment, the tension around Marcus's bag dissipated as the officers looked in that direction. Seeing the supervisors momentarily distracted, Desiree reached over to hand Marcus his phone. He clutched it as if anchoring himself to reality. Supervisor Maynard came to a decision. "It's not testing positive for narcotics. We'll note this as suspicious but inconclusive. We can't hold you if it's not an illegal substance. However, as a precaution, I want to run the rest of your items through a second X-ray and do an additional pat-down, standard procedure." Desiree bristled at the phrase standard procedure. She gripped Marcus's shoulder and nodded. "We'll cooperate," she said, forcing a calm tone. Inwardly, she felt a simmering anger. Who would plant something like that? Was it a random act or something more nefarious? She couldn't say, but she had a mother's intuition that this was no coincidence. Marcus was led to a secondary screening area. 2 more TSA agents approached, each wearing gloves. They instructed him to stand with his feet apart, arms outstretched. Desiree started to follow, but one agent raised a hand. "MAAM, wait outside, please." Desiree tensed, but she complied. She positioned herself so she could watch through the glass partition. She saw them pat down her son, wave a metal detector wand around his waist and ankles. Marcus endured it silently, cheeks flushed, eyes glimmering with embarrassment and fear. Finally, the agent turned to the phone Marcus still held. "Hand that over," he ordered. Marcus hesitated for just a second before complying. The agent swabbed the device, presumably checking for traces of explosives. Satisfied, he returned the phone. Supervisor Maynard reappeared. "We'll allow you to proceed, but we reserve the right to detain you if anything further arises." She nodded at the small plastic bag. "We'll dispose of this, as it doesn't register as any known substance. You're free to go." A wave of relief hit Marcus. He grabbed his belongings, stuffing them back into the backpack with trembling hands. Desiree exhaled a sigh she felt she'd been holding for hours. She nodded curtly at the officers, then gently guided Marcus toward the exit of the security area. They still had time to make their flight, but the carefree mood of the morning had been shattered. They moved away from the checkpoint. Desiree turned to Marcus. "Baby, are you okay?" Marcus blinked, tears threatening to spill. He was 18, trying to be a man, but his voice cracked. "I'm fine, Mom. That was weird. Who would do that?" Desiree didn't have an answer. She hugged him, ignoring the curious stares of passers-by. The memory of that plastic pouch scorched her mind. Something was amiss, and though the immediate threat had passed, she had an unshakable feeling that more trouble loomed on the horizon. Once past security, Desiree and Marcus found themselves in a sea of people bustling through Concourse B. Flight information screens glowed overhead, shining like beacons in the controlled chaos. Desiree checked the time on her phone and was relieved to see they still had about 50 minutes before boarding. Marcus's shoulders remained rigid, the tension lingering from the search. Desiree tried to soothe him. "We can get something to eat. A warm meal might help us both calm down." They strolled to a small cafe near Gate 18, where they found pastries, coffee, and a short line of fatigued travelers. Desiree ordered a latte, while Marcus opted for an iced tea. Neither felt much like eating, but Marcus grabbed a granola bar for the sake of having something to nibble on. They picked a small table by the window where they could see planes taxiing in the distance. Marcus kept glancing around as though expecting TSA agents to appear out of nowhere. Desiree noticed his distress and gently placed a hand on his arm. "We made it through. It's going to be okay, baby." Marcus tried to smile, but ended up looking miserable. "I know, Mum. Someone put that pouch in my bag. I'm sure of it." "Why? Who?" Desiree had no answer. Instead, she squeezed his arm. "Let's focus on getting to San Francisco. If we dwell on this, we'll just be giving them our energy. Whoever did it, they failed to ruin our trip." A moment of calm settled over them until a deep voice from behind interrupted, laced with cold accusation. "Excuse me," it said. Marcus and Desiree turned. A middle-aged white woman, short hair pinned back with a severe clip, stood flanked by two uniformed airport security officers. The airport security, not the TSA. One of them, a man with a trim moustache, crossed his arms while the other, a woman with dark hair and sharp eyes, wore an expression that was half apology, half suspicion. "Are you Marcus Campbell?" the woman demanded, holding a small notepad. She wore a navy blazer with a laminated ID that read Airport Security Coordinator G. Sanderson. Marcus's heart lurched. "Yes," he answered cautiously. Desiree rose, stepping forward protectively. "And who are you?" Sanderson offered a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm the Airport Security Coordinator on duty. We have reason to believe there was an incident with your bag at the TSA checkpoint. Can you come with me to answer a few questions?" Marcus's breath caught in his throat. "I already answered all their questions." Desiree frowned, a cord of anger plucking at her patience. "My son was cleared by TSA. They found nothing. This is harassment." Sanderson's expression remained impassive. "Ma'am, I'd advise you to remain cooperative. We've been alerted that suspicious substances may have passed through. My team and I are just following up." Desiree's temper flared. The memory of the humiliating search was still fresh. "We are not going anywhere else without a valid reason. Where is the TSA supervisor who cleared my son?" One of the uniformed security officers stepped closer, posture stiff. "We're not with the TSA, ma'am. We have jurisdiction in the airport terminals. We just need you both to answer a few routine questions." Marcus stood, the legs of his chair scraping on the floor. The cafe's other patrons sensed the tension, casting anxious glances. A few pulled out their phones, discreetly recording. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. He didn't want to become a spectacle, but his mother's protective stance made him feel slightly safer. "All right," Marcus said, voice trembling. "We'll answer your questions. But I don't understand. Let's handle this quietly." Desiree cut in, her voice tight. She refused to be dragged into a shouting match in the middle of the terminal. Sanderson nodded, gesturing for them to follow her to a more secluded seating area near some unused gates. Marcus and Desiree gathered their belongings. The two security officers flanked them as if escorting suspects. The group found an empty row of seats near Gate 25, an area that wasn't currently in use. Sanderson faced Marcus with the air of someone preparing for an interrogation. "So, we've received an alert from TSA regarding an unknown white powder discovered in your carry-on. It tested negative for narcotics, but the incident is flagged as suspicious." Marcus's frustration boiled over. "It's not mine. They tested it. It's not drugs." "We don't know how it got there, and we passed all required checks." Desiree stared daggers at Sanderson. "This is starting to feel like harassment. What more do you need from us?" Sanderson shrugged, as though the answer was obvious. "Sometimes smugglers try to slip past security with decoy substances. Just because it tested negative once doesn't mean we ignore it. We need to make a thorough report. We'd like to inspect your bag again." Desiree's voice iced over. "And if we say no?" One of the officers exchanged glances with Sanderson, then spoke in a placating tone. "Ma'am, it's best to cooperate. Otherwise, we might have grounds to detain you." Desiree weighed her options. The last thing she wanted was to be physically detained, especially with her son in the middle of this. She glanced at Marcus, who gave a resigned nod. Fine. Inspect away. Marcus handed over his backpack for the second time. Sanderson and the officer rummaged through it methodically, flipping through the pages of the same novel, turning each pocket inside out. They found nothing. Desiree's expression soured, frustration mingling with a desire to scream at the top of her lungs. Sanderson, clearly unhappy with the lack of evidence, jotted notes on her pad. All right, so there's nothing here now. Still, the presence of that powder can't be ignored. She scribbled more notes, then looked up. I'll have to file a full report, and you may be contacted for further investigation. Desiree's anger brimmed, dangerously close to boiling over. This is enough. You have no grounds to hold us. We have a flight to catch. We're done here. Sanderson arched an eyebrow. If you try to leave without cooperating, we may need to call for additional security measures. Marcus's fear gave way to a spark of indignation. We've cooperated twice. Are we under arrest? Because if not, I'd like to go board my plane. Sanderson pursed her lips. We're not placing you under arrest at this time, but we do have the right to involve the Atlanta Police Department if you refuse to comply. Desiree unleashed a calm, measured fury. Then call them. I'll happily speak with them, because I'm certain this is unlawful detention. We've done nothing wrong, and if you continue, I will call our attorney. For a moment, Sanderson seemed taken aback by Desiree's resolve. The two stared at each other, the tension palpable. Finally, Sanderson looked to her officers, who seemed less certain now. She sighed, snapped her notepad shut, and said, "All right, you're free to go for now. But we have your information, and if we need more follow-up, we'll contact you. Don't leave the city until this matter is fully resolved." Desiree's nostrils flared. Our flight leaves in less than half an hour. We're visiting family in San Francisco. If your team tries to stop us without cause, you'll be hearing from my lawyer. Sanderson hesitated, then stepped aside. We can't legally hold you, given the negative narcotics test. But consider this an ongoing investigation. She motioned to her officers. With a final nod of warning, she turned and walked away, black pumps clicking on the polished floor. Marcus exhaled, feeling faint. Desiree placed a hand over her racing heart. Her body trembled with pent-up rage and adrenaline. They stood in silence for a moment, letting the reality of what just happened sink in. Their simple trip had devolved into a confrontation that felt anything but routine. Desiree gathered her composure. She checked the time. They still had a chance to make their flight if they hurried. She tugged Marcus's arm. "Come on, baby. Let's get out of here before they change their minds." Marcus nodded, swallowing past a lump in his throat. He slung his backpack over his shoulder, his eyes still scanning the airport nervously, half expecting someone else to pop up and accuse him of more wrongdoing. They walked briskly back through the terminal, hearts pounding with every step. Neither had any inkling that this was just the beginning, and that a storm was about to explode that would rock the airport to its core. Back in their seats on the plane to San Francisco, Desiree and Marcus were shaken. The ordeal at security lingered like a bad dream, humiliating pat-downs, ominous threats, and a strange pouch they'd never seen before. Desiree's protective instincts, honed by years of subtle discrimination, flared into full force. She couldn't stay silent. Her father's words, "Silence is complicity," echoed in her mind. In San Francisco, they tried to relax with extended family. Yet even as they strolled along Fisherman's Wharf, Desiree couldn't stop replaying the confrontation. She sought advice from her sister, Tasha, and reached out to Mr. Bernstein, a trusted family lawyer. He encouraged them to document every detail and consider filing a complaint. Marcus struggled to shake the fear that airport officials would target him again, but Desiree reminded him they had done nothing wrong. Fueled by righteous anger, she decided they should return home early to address the issue directly. Tasha offered to help, but Desiree stood firm. It was her fight, as Marcus's mother. They boarded a return flight with dread coiling in their stomachs. Desiree was ready. If those officials tried to corner her son again, she would stand her ground, whatever the consequences. The stage was set for a confrontation that would rattle Hartsfield-Jackson to its core. Unbeknownst to Desiree and Marcus, Supervisor Maynard and Coordinator Sanderson clashed behind the scenes. Sanderson insisted the presence of white powder was no coincidence, pressuring airport administration to keep the Campbells on a watch list. Fueled by rumors rather than facts, she argued it might be a test run for smuggling or worse. Despite Maynard's insistence that tests came back negative and the Campbells were harmless, Sanderson refused to drop it. She filed internal memos implying Marcus posed a security risk, prompting whispers among staff. Several employees, worried about public fallout, questioned Sanderson's motives, especially her past record of singling out black travelers. Still, the rumor took on a life of its own, seeding doubts among airport personnel. By the time Desiree decided to return to Atlanta early, Sanderson's influence had spread. The stage was set for another confrontation as soon as mother and son stepped off their flight, a standoff that would spiral far beyond what anyone anticipated. The flight back to Atlanta was tense. Marcus stared out the window, headphones on, though he wasn't really listening to anything. Desiree tapped her fingers restlessly on the armrest, mentally rehearsing what she'd say if security approached them again. She had a plan: remain calm, demand a legal basis for any further searches, and, if pushed, call Mr. Bernstein immediately. They landed just after midday. The moment they stepped into Hartsfield-Jackson, the echoes of overhead announcements and the swirl of travelers struck a nerve. Desiree noticed the subtle changes right away: more security personnel patrolling, a few glances cast in their direction by uniformed staff. She couldn't be sure if it was just her imagination, but a chill crawled up her spine. "Let's get our bags and go," Marcus whispered, hoping to avoid any confrontation. They headed to baggage claim, weaving through the crowd with purpose. An older gentleman struggled with an oversized suitcase on the carousel, while a family of 4 huddled close to spot their luggage. It looked ordinary enough, just another hectic day at the airport. Desiree began to breathe easier. That relief lasted until 3 uniformed officers materialized, blocking their path. Standing in the middle was Coordinator Sanderson. She wore the same severe expression, a thick file in her arms. "Miss S. Campbell, Marcus, a word please," she said, as though it weren't a request but a command. Desiree's gaze snapped into a glare. Marcus felt his stomach twist. He recalled Charlotte's words about going public. Had he known they'd run into Sanderson right here, he might have been filming already. But now they were once again cornered. Sanderson cleared her throat. "We have new information that suggests your son is under investigation for suspicious activity related to our security protocols. I'm afraid we'll need you both to come with us for questioning." Desiree's anger ignited. "Absolutely not. We went through this. Your TSA test was negative, and we've committed no crime." A flicker of triumph lit Sanderson's eyes like she'd been itching for a confrontation. "We have reason to believe he may have been testing how to bypass our security systems. If you refuse to cooperate, we will be forced to detain you." Marcus felt a flare of outrage. "This is insane." Other travelers began to notice. A few turned their heads, some paused, uncertain if they should intervene. Desiree realized they were drawing attention, but in that moment she decided she would not let this stand. She spoke loudly, her voice resonating with righteous fury. "Is this what you do? Harass innocent black travelers under flimsy pretenses? I want to see your supervisor and the airport manager." Sanderson didn't flinch. "I am authorized to handle security matters. If you continue to resist, you'll be detained for obstruction." That was the final straw. Desiree pulled out her phone. She dialed Mr. Bernstein's number in full view of everyone. Marcus quickly pulled out his phone too, eyes scanning the crowd for someone who might be filming. A couple of bystanders held up phones, curiosity piqued by the confrontation. "Mr. Bernstein," Desiree said into the phone, speaking loudly enough for the nearby crowd to hear. "This is Desiree Campbell at Hartsfield-Jackson. Airport security is unlawfully detaining us again under false pretenses. Please advise." She paused, letting him respond. Then she repeated, "Yes, I will. They're threatening to detain my son without a warrant. They claim he's under investigation for testing security protocols. There is zero evidence. We have witnesses. We're in the baggage claim area." A stirring in the crowd indicated the presence of a few sympathetic onlookers. Some murmured in agreement, others began filming openly. The tension skyrocketed. Sanderson's face hardened. She signaled the officers to approach. The moment they advanced, Desiree snapped. She pointed at them fiercely and roared, "Don't you dare touch my son!" An officer hesitated. Another tried to step forward, but Desiree planted herself in front of Marcus, refusing to move. In the swirl of adrenaline, her voice rose in an unexpected crescendo. She turned to the bystanders, some of whom had phones out. "Help us," she pleaded. "They're trying to detain my son without cause. Record everything." At least 10 people were recording now. The confrontation grew. A wave of agitation passed through the crowd, which was swelling with new arrivals from recent flights. People demanded to know what was happening. Shouts of "leave them alone" mingled with demands for Sanderson to provide an explanation. Meanwhile, airport staff realized something big was unfolding. A manager came rushing over, radio in hand, eyes wide with alarm. "What's going on?" she demanded, stepping between Desiree and Sanderson. Sanderson brandished her file. "Security matter, ma'am. This passenger is suspected of testing security vulnerabilities. We need to detain him for questioning." The manager looked at the growing crowd, at the cameras, at Desiree's livid face. She saw the potential PR nightmare blossoming by the second. "Sanderson, is this official? Did TSA request this?" Sanderson hesitated, perhaps not expecting the manager to question her so openly. "We have our own investigative leads, show me," the manager insisted. She took the file and skimmed it. Her jaw tightened. "This doesn't look like conclusive evidence to me." Why is this a public confrontation? Desiree was still on the phone with Mr. Bernstein. She overheard him telling her to remain calm, but her fury was beyond placation. She stepped around the manager to face Sanderson again. "We're not going anywhere with you. This is harassment. We're leaving, or you arrest us right here in front of all these people and their cameras." Sanderson's cheeks reddened. She spat. "Fine. Officers, do what you must." Suddenly, 2 officers grabbed Marcus's arms. He yelped in pain. Desiree shrieked. She lunged forward, her phone clattering to the floor. "No, you let him go." She wrapped her arms around one officer, tears streaming, voice cracking from rage and terror. The crowd erupted in chaos. People shouted for them to stop. Others screamed. The manager tried to intervene, but the officers had already begun forcibly moving Marcus toward a side hallway. By now, at least 20 or 30 travelers were filming or shouting in protest. A swirl of confusion and anger filled the baggage claim area. Then something snapped in Desiree's mind. She felt a surge of clarity, like an invisible threshold had been crossed. She broke away from the officer she was grappling with and sprinted for a row of emergency exit doors. Security alarms triggered the moment she pushed through, unleashing a cacophony of high-pitched wails across the terminal. The effect was instantaneous. A klaxon echoed through the vast halls of the airport, announcing a potential emergency. Overhead lights flashed. Confused travelers froze, looking around in panic. Gate agents locked down flight operations. TSA and airport police scrambled to figure out what was happening. In the confusion, the officers holding Marcus froze, uncertain whether to chase Desiree or maintain their grip on him. Desiree had set off a chain reaction no one could stop. In an era of heightened security, a triggered alarm at baggage claim was enough to mobilize an immediate response. Over the airport pass system, a robotic announcement began. Attention, a security alert has been triggered. Please remain calm and follow instructions from airport personnel. Sanderson's face drained of color. "Shut off that alarm," she shouted, but the manager barked back. "Are you insane? We have protocols to follow." In those crucial moments, everything ground to a halt. Flights on the tarmac were told to stand by. TSA closed inbound lines. The entire baggage claim level swarmed with security forces trying to assess if there was an active threat. Screaming passengers ran in different directions. Families huddled together, anxious to know if there was an attack or an evacuation. Chaos reigned. Marcus, still in the officer's grip, watched in stunned disbelief as his mother, tears streaking her face, stood by the exit door. Adrenaline roared in her ears. She locked eyes with him and shouted, voice echoing amid the alarms, "Let him go, or this will get worse." It was an ultimatum that stunned everyone. The alarm continued to blare, and somewhere in the swirling madness, a distant voice over the radio commanded, "Initiate partial lockdown procedures in baggage claim." 12 minutes after Desiree's frantic flight to the emergency door, the area was effectively shut down. No one in or out. Flights were delayed, police were streaming in. And standing at the center of the storm was a furious black mother who had been pushed to her limit, and a teenage son who realized his life might never be the same after this. For a few surreal minutes, the baggage claim descended into a war zone of noise and panic. The emergency alarm kept wailing, echoing off polished floors and glass walls. It seemed that every law enforcement officer in the airport converged, armed with conflicting information. Some thought there was an active shooter, others believed a fire alarm had been triggered. Confusion reigned as the manager, staff, and TSA tried to piece together the real story. But Desiree's intentions had been singular: disrupt this injustice until they released her son. And in that pandemonium, the officers who had grabbed Marcus lost their nerve. They weren't prepared for a public relations fiasco on this scale. Stray glimpses of travelers filming the entire debacle sent a chill through them. This wasn't a situation they could quietly brush under the rug. An authoritative voice cut through the chaos. "Release that boy now." It belonged to a senior airport official. His name tag read Deputy Director Samuel Jennings. His stern glare pinned the officers in place. Though they hesitated, the presence of multiple cameras, combined with the direct order, forced compliance. Marcus was let go with a shove, stumbling forward as he rubbed his reddened wrists. Desiree saw her son freed and felt the adrenaline crash, leaving her trembling. She staggered from the exit door, letting it swing shut behind her. The alarm still screeched, but she didn't care. She rushed to Marcus, enveloping him in a fierce hug, both of them breathing hard. Around them, confusion still bubbled, but a sense of reprieve settled over mother and son. "Are you okay?" Desiree gasped, tears streaming. Marcus nodded, swallowing back sobs. "I'm fine, Mom, I'm fine." Deputy Director Jennings stepped forward, followed by the manager who had tried to intervene earlier. Sanderson hovered in the background, looking both furious and uncertain, clutching her precious file as though it might justify everything. The officers who had grabbed Marcus drifted away, possibly trying to disappear from the center of attention. Jennings addressed Desiree with careful politeness. "Ma'am, we need to sort this out. You triggered an emergency alarm. That's a serious offense." Desiree turned a steely gaze on him. "They were assaulting my son, threatening to detain him with no evidence. I did what I had to do." Jennings nodded slowly. "I understand you feel that way, but feel that way." Desiree's voice cracked with outrage. "This is the second time they've targeted him. Racial profiling, harassment, call it whatever you want. I'm done playing nice." Marcus looked around, noticing more people had gathered, many with phones still recording. Some travelers shouted words of support, others wore perplexed expressions, unsure what they'd just witnessed. The manager whispered something to Jennings, who nodded. Jennings took a breath, glancing at the swirling cameras and the real-time meltdown happening in the terminal. Let's move this to a private office to discuss. We need to clear the alarm, restore order. Please, let's not make a scene. Desiree laughed, a raw sound laced with bitterness. A scene? You created it when you tried to take my son. Jennings realized he was stuck between upholding security protocol and diffusing a potential riot. If he tried to arrest Desiree now, the crowd might erupt. If he let them go without clearing the matter, he risked the airport's reputation. After a tense pause, he turned to the manager. Cancel the lockdown. Shut off the alarm. Let's get these folks somewhere calm, away from the crowd. Eventually, the shrieking alarm ceased. A soft hush fell over baggage claim. Gate announcements resumed overhead, and travelers, still jittery, started milling around again. The deputy director signaled more officers to corral the onlookers, urging them to move along. Some did, others lingered, hungry for more drama. Desiree and Marcus found themselves escorted to a nearby conference room, accompanied by Jennings, the manager, and a different set of airport security, more subdued, less hostile. Sanderson was nowhere to be seen. Perhaps she decided not to court further humiliation. In the conference room, Jennings offered seats to the Campbells. Desiree remained standing. Marcus sank into a chair, exhausted. Jennings sighed. First, I want to apologize for any distress caused. But you have to understand, we had concerns. Desiree glared. Concerns based on nothing but speculation and racism. Jennings pressed his lips together. I understand how you might perceive it that way. However, our records indicate Desiree cut him off, voice trembling with controlled fury. Listen carefully. You have no right to keep us here. My son is not a suspect in anything. You have zero evidence. If you try to detain us again, we'll sue, and I promise you I will not stop until every single person involved is held accountable. Marcus watched his mother with newfound awe. The protective love she showed was almost tangible, a blazing force. Jennings raised his hands in a placating gesture. No one's suggesting we're detaining you now. We just want to ensure all misunderstandings are resolved. Let me be direct. It appears Miss Sanderson overstepped her authority. We'll be investigating her conduct separately. As for the alarm you pulled, that is a serious matter, but under the circumstances, I doubt pressing charges would serve anyone's interest. Desiree's shoulders sagged with relief, though her eyes were still aflame. Then we're free to go? Yes, Jennings replied. But please, let me arrange for a proper escort to ensure you exit the premises without further incident. Marcus raised a hand, speaking for the first time since the alarm fiasco. Will the TSA or security come after us again? Jennings shook his head. I'll make sure that doesn't happen. If you choose to file a formal complaint, Desiree jabbed a finger at him. Oh, we will. Count on it. The tension hung thick in the small room. Finally, Jennings escorted them out, weaving through side hallways to avoid more public scrutiny. Outside, in the humid Georgia air, Desiree and Marcus felt an odd mixture of triumph, exhaustion, and lingering fury. They had, in effect, shut down a section of the world's busiest airport, ignited by a mother's refusal to see her child violated again. Even as they slid into a waiting taxi, the adrenaline still pulsed. Marcus rested his head against the seat, eyes closed. Desiree stared out the window, her mind racing with the next steps, calls to Mr. Bernstein, statements to the press if necessary, anything to keep this from being swept under the rug. She wasn't naive. She knew they were on the brink of a fight that could consume weeks or months. But she also knew that the seeds of justice had been planted. She had refused to bow down, and the entire airport witnesses from around the world had seen it. Now, it was a matter of making sure real accountability followed. One way or another, she would protect her son's future. And if that meant standing in the line of fire again, so be it. The fallout from the incident at Hartsfield-Jackson spread rapidly. Videos posted by shocked travelers went viral within hours, capturing Desiree's desperate screams, the officers manhandling Marcus, and that startling moment she sprinted for the emergency exit. Social media exploded with debate. Some labeled her a reckless agitator, others hailed her as a hero, a mother protecting her child from institutionalized discrimination. Major news outlets picked up the story. Headlines ranged from mother's desperate act shuts down Atlanta airport to racial profiling or security protocol, controversy at Hartsfield-Jackson. Desiree's phone buzzed incessantly with interview requests. Activist organizations reached out, offering support, legal assistance, and platforms to share her side of the story. The viral nature of the footage ensured that the Campbell family's predicament became a national conversation. Coordinator Sanderson, caught in the eye of the storm, faced immediate scrutiny. The airport administration placed her on administrative leave pending a formal investigation. Internal memos revealed her communications, casting doubt on her claims of a credible security risk. Investigators from multiple agencies probed her motivations and methods. Whispers circulated that she had a history of targeting black travelers. Other employees shared anecdotes, previous incidents that hadn't gone viral, overshadowed by bureaucratic deflection. Meanwhile, Supervisor Maynard provided documentation that contradicted Sanderson's claims, indicating that the initial TSA clearance was legitimate. She stated in an official report that the real reason for suspicion was uncorroborated rumor. In interviews with airport administrators, Maynard recounted how Sanderson had insisted on building a case against Marcus without evidence. The cracks in Sanderson's story became gaping holes. Within a week, airport officials announced a press conference to address the incident. Desiree, accompanied by Mr. Bernstein, attended but chose not to speak. Instead, she watched from the sidelines, arms folded, as the airport's chief operating officer apologized for any distress caused to the Campbell family by inappropriate or excessive security measures. They vowed to review protocols and ensure no further harassment of passengers based on unsubstantiated suspicions. They didn't explicitly mention race, but the undertone was clear. Karma hit hard for those responsible. Sanderson resigned under mounting pressure, facing potential civil rights lawsuits. Several of her subordinates were reassigned or terminated after an internal audit revealed a disturbing pattern of complaints from passengers of color. The TSA, eager to distance itself from the fiasco, cooperated fully with investigations, releasing statements clarifying that they had not requested Marcus's second detention. For Desiree and Marcus, relief came in increments. They filed formal complaints with both the TSA and the airport authorities. They considered a lawsuit for damages. Mr. Bernstein felt they had a strong case for emotional distress, false detainment, and violations of civil rights. Settlement offers materialized from the airport's legal team, accompanied by confidentiality clauses, but Desiree wasn't sure if she wanted to accept hush money. Part of her longed to see a genuine systemic change. Media outlets hounded them. Desiree took a handful of interviews, always calm but unwavering in her condemnation of what had happened. She emphasized that her rage was fueled by a mother's love, a response to years of subtle and overt racism. "I'm not an activist by nature," she told one journalist, "but my father taught me that sometimes silence is complicity. I refuse to be silent when it comes to my son's future." Marcus found himself the reluctant center of national attention. Classmates, friends, and even celebrities reached out on social media, praising his composure under pressure. He felt uneasy about the fame. He never sought the spotlight. He just wanted to be a regular teenager preparing for college. He confided in his mother that he found the entire ordeal both validating and overwhelming. Strangers called him brave for enduring humiliation, but all he had done was survive. The real hero in his mind was his mum. With each passing day, the wounds began to heal. Marcus resumed his summer reading for college, occasionally glancing at the thick stack of legal documents that now occupied a corner of his desk. Desiree took phone calls from other parents who shared horror stories of profiling in airports and other public spaces. She reassured them, lent an ear, and promised to keep fighting for change. In the end, the family reached a settlement with the airport. Though the details remained confidential, the settlement included a sizable compensation and a formal written apology. But Desiree didn't sign until they agreed to a policy revision that mandated more rigorous oversight for secondary detentions, as well as mandatory anti-bias training for all airport security personnel. It was a small step towards systemic improvement, a sliver of victory gleaned from a storm of chaos. As for Sanderson, rumor had it she struggled to find new work. Investigations into her past led to multiple civil suits, forcing her to sell her home to cover legal fees. Hard karma, some observers said, the scales of justice balancing out. Desiree didn't revel in her downfall, but she couldn't ignore a sense of relief that someone was finally held accountable. In the quiet moments after the storm, Marcus and his mother sat on their porch, sipping sweet tea. The Georgia sky stretched in pink and gold. Marcus broke the silence. "Mom, I still don't understand who put that powder in my bag. Or why." Desiree shrugged sadly. "Maybe we'll never know. Could have been random, could have been malicious. But in a way, it doesn't matter now. We faced it." Marcus nodded. The horizon shimmered with the promise of another day, one free from the weight of fear. He had learned more about courage, injustice, and the power of a mother's love than he ever expected. The airport might have tried to break them, but instead it became a stage where Desiree Campbell proved the lengths to which she would go to protect her son and, by extension, how one act of defiance could ripple into a nationwide call for justice. From that day forward, people would remember Desiree Campbell as the mother who wouldn't back down when security labeled her innocent son a threat. Their story sparked overdue conversations about racial profiling, parental protection, and the power of standing up, even if your voice shakes. And while Marcus continues his journey into adulthood with newfound strength, it's clear that change often arises from moments of chaos that no one sees coming. Now, I invite you to keep this conversation alive. If you believe in the power of speaking out against injustice, share this video with those who need to hear it. Let's shine a brighter light on racial profiling and push for better accountability in all public spaces. For more stories that inspire, challenge, and unite, subscribe to our channel and stay connected. Your voice matters. Together, we can keep the momentum going one story at a time.